The truth is often avoided because it is ugly and unpleasant. Never appeal to truth and reality, unless you are prepared for the anger that comes from disenchantment. Life is so harsh and distressing, that people who manufacture romance, or conjure up fantasy, are like oases in the desert. Everyone flocks to them. There is great power in tapping into the fantasies of the masses. Fantasy can never operate alone. It requires the backdrop of boredom, the humdrum and the mundane. It is the oppressiveness of reality that allows fantasies to take root and bloom. In times of scarcity and decline, fantasies have even more power. People rarely believe that their problems arise from their own misdeeds and stupidity. Someone, or something out there, is to blame. And so, salvation comes from the outside as well. To gain power, you must be a source of pleasure for those around you. And pleasure comes from playing to people's fantasies. The person who can spin a fantasy out of an oppressive reality has access to untold power. Never promise a gradual improvement through hard work. Rather, promise the moon. The great and sudden transformation. The pot of gold. As you search for the fantasy that will take hold of the masses, keep your eye on the banal truths that weigh heavily on us all. Never be distracted by people's glamorous portraits of their lives on Facebook or Instagram. Search and dig for what really imprisons them. Once you find that, you have the magical key that will put great power into your hands. Human nature seems to be drawn to fantasy, like a moth to the flame. As the entrepreneur and author, Robert Ringer says, people say they love truth. But in reality, they want to believe that which they love is true. Unfortunately, most people live in an unreal world. They create a world in their own minds, based on the way they would like it to be, rather than the way it actually is. They seem to have adopted the philosophy of Ashley Brilliant, who once remarked, "I have abandoned the search for truth, and am now looking for a good fantasy." Let us examine a few harsh realities, and the opportunities for power they provide. The reality. Change is slow and gradual. It requires hard work, a bit of luck, a fair amount of sacrifice, and a lot of patience. The fantasy. A sudden transformation will bring a total change in one's fortunes. No hard work, luck, self-sacrifice, or time required. The lure of something for nothing. This is a favorite fantasy of charlatans and conmen. Promise a great change, make it easy, and you will have followers. Get-rich-quick schemes on social media platforms. Pills with amazing health benefits. Crazy weight loss gimmicks. Riches, health and well-being, a beautiful physique. All without sacrifice and pain. A fantasy. The reality. The social realm has hard set codes and boundaries. We understand these limits and know that we have to move within the same familiar circles, day in and day out. The fantasy. We can enter a totally new world, with different codes, and the promise of adventure. The fantasy of the exotic, the new and the strange. The unknowable and indecipherable. It can be a different culture, that seems to offer everything our mundane culture lacks. Or the exotic fantasy can be sexual. But it must not be fulfilled. For to bring power, fantasy must remain to some degree unrealized. The bodily charms of the mistress, once conquered, eventually become familiar. And the search for a new beauty begins. The fantasy of the exotic can be simply the hope for relief from boredom. Con artists love to play on the boredom of the working world, its lack of adventure. Their con might involve, say, the recovery of lost Spanish treasure. Add the possible participation of an alluring Mexican señorita. And maybe, a connection to the president of a South American country. Anything, offering release from the humdrum. The reality. Death. The dead cannot be brought back. The past cannot be changed. The fantasy. A sudden reversal of this intolerable fact. This con has many variations. And it requires great skill and subtlety. The beauty and importance of the art of Vermeer have long been recognized. His paintings are small in number and are extremely rare. In 1930, though, Vermeers began to appear on the art market. Experts were called in and pronounced them real. Possession of these new Vermeers would crown a collector's career. In a strange way, Vermeer had been brought back to life. The past had been changed. Only later did it come out that the new Vermeers were the work of a Dutch forger named Han van Meegeren. And he had chosen Vermeer for his scam because he understood fantasy. The paintings would seem real because the public, and the experts as well, so desperately wanted to believe they were. Keep in mind, fantasy is not always fantastical. Reality itself is sometimes so theatrical and stylized that fantasy becomes a desire for simple things. For example, the image that Abraham Lincoln created of himself as the homespun country lawyer with a beard. It made him the common man's president. Lincoln played the commoner, but was careful to maintain distance. The key to using fantasy is distance. The distance has allure and promise, seems simple, and problem-free. What you are offering should be ungraspable. It is the mirage in the distance, always withdrawing as the sucker approaches. Never be too direct in describing the fantasy, keep it vague. As a forger of fantasies, let your victim come close enough to see, and be tempted. But keep him far away enough that he stays dreaming and desiring. Be aware, while there is power tapping into the fantasies of the masses, there is also danger. Fantasy usually contains an element of play. The public half realizes it is being duped, but keeps the dream alive for entertainment, and as a temporary diversion from everyday life. So keep it light. Never come too close to the place where you are actually counted on to produce results. That place may prove to be extremely hazardous.